you, and especially to the paper presenters. By the way, my name is Muhammad Mahyudi, and I'll be chairing this first parallel session 1, group 1. Okay, we'll be having 3 presenters, and the 2 of whom are already here, and we're still waiting for Professor Abdurrahman Yusri. But then again, you can just start straight away, since we have the first presenter with us already. So, with a little of clarification on the format, each presenters will be given 20 minutes to present their case, and once all the 3 paper presenters have presented, we'll be left with around 20 minutes for a good Q&A session. So that's the format. We'll be listening to all 3 presenters first before we proceed with the question and answer session. So if you have any questions, so please keep it at the very last end of the session. Okay? So the time now is 2:17 to 18, and I wish to now call upon Professor Zaman to take the rostrum and have the floor. With that, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulil kareem. So, I want to go through a little bit of history. When Islamic economics was started, it was with great hopes and ambitions. It was a new vision, a new paradigm. It would change the world. But somehow we got sidetracked. So now I want to explain what happened, how it started, and how we can put it back on track. So there was a promise that was made by the Islamic economists of the first generation, very clear, that our system will provide justice, equality, end poverty, and bring all sorts of great outcomes. But we haven't seen those outcomes. So why? So now, what I would like to say is that the biggest problem that the Ummah is currently facing is the absorption of Western knowledge structures which have been developed over the past few centuries. Islam started as a religion of knowledge. The very first wahi says that اقرأ بربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ بربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم. So this introduction Allah Ta'ala is giving to himself, that who am I? He is introducing himself to the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam at Hira, when Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is in search for guidance. So Allah Ta'ala could have chosen thousands of sifat by which to introduce himself. But he chose to introduce himself as the educator, as the teacher, as the giver of knowledge. And it was this knowledge which changed the destiny of initially the first recipients, the first Muslims, and then the whole world. So, the first crisis of knowledge that was faced by the Ummah was when the Greek knowledge first came onto the scene, and the Muslims were very impressed by this Greek knowledge. And there was a group, the Mu'tazila, and they held that the Greek knowledge should be exactly on par with the Wahi. It was phrased in the term that reason is the same as Wahi, but actually by reason what they meant was Greek philosophy. It was not meant, logic was not meant. So the idea was that Greek philosophy should be treated on par with Wahi, and this became actually the official religion. The Khalifa adopted started this and he enforced this religion on all of the public, and there was only a very few people who resisted. But Alhamdulillah, Allah Ta'ala saved the religion and defeated this position, and now we understand, because that Greek knowledge ultimately turned out to be all wrong. Nearly all of the propositions of Greek philosophy that were widely believed turned out to be wrong. So actually, one of the reasons for the collapse of Christianity and the rise of secularism in the West was because Christianity accepted a lot of those Greek propositions and they got mixed in with the religion. And so when scientific findings came up which contradicted them, then the religion suffered a great defeat in the West, in European history. In Islamic history, we almost had the same thing happen, because if the Mu'tazila had succeeded, then the Greek teachings and Islam would be all mixed up, and then later on, when scientific findings showed that the Greek teachings were wrong, people would say, oh, Islam is wrong, because Greek teachings were supposed to become part of Islam at that time. Now today we are facing, at that time of course Imam Ghazali came and he wrote the book Tahafut al-Falasifa, in which he rejected most of the ideas of Greek philosophy and accepted a few that were correct. And that basically ended the fitna of the Greek philosophy. Today we are facing the even greater fitna than the Greek philosophy, because at that Greek philosophy time, the Muslims were in power. Today we are not having power, and at the same time, the fitna of Western knowledge is afflicting the Ummah. Today, the vast majority of the Ummah believes that Western knowledge is on par with the Quran. And if they see a conflict between Western knowledge and the Quran, then they reinterpret the Quran to make it conform, rather than rejecting Western knowledge structures. So, in addition, the vast majority of the Ummah believes that for progress, we need to acquire Western knowledge. We don't need the Quran. So there is a hadith, and there are many other teachings of Islam to that effect, that if somebody has acquired the gift of the Quran, but he thinks that somebody else has more important knowledge, then he has shown disrespect for the blessings of Allah. So this is the condition of the Ummah today. We are all showing great disrespect for the blessings that we have been given. So now, important to understand that at the beginning of the 19th century, 85% of the globe was under the domination of the West. And so, one of the things that one has to understand is that colonialism or imperialism is not just a process of power understood in terms of, laws and resources and control. The more important structure is the invisible structure of knowledge. Today, what has happened is that the whole world has been subjected to has accepted Western knowledge systems, and how we organize and discipline and institutionalize and transmit knowledge, not only about the physical and material world, but about social, political, cultural, religious, legal, everything. Everything is framed in terms of Western categories. And these categories are often not compatible with Islamic categories. But this conflict is not realized. So what happened was that in World War I and II, Europe became weak as a result of battling among themselves. And this was what allowed liberation struggles to succeed all over the world. Now these liberation struggles were energized and powered and fueled by Islamic ideas. People said that we will establish Islam and we will bring an Islamic state into existence and we will run it with Islamic economics. But what actually happened was rather different. There was this class, which it is very important to understand. This is called the comprador class in Latin America, and it has different names. The black skins with white masks in Africa and brown babus in Asia. But basically the white people were too few to actually control the entire globe. And so they co-opted a class of people who were going to act on their behalf. And these people were trained to think like the white man and to act on his behalf. They were trained to hate their own countrymen and to have contempt for their past and heritage and to believe in the superiority of the West regardless of any objective criteria. So it was this class which was governing the Islamic world on behalf of the white rulers, and when the white rulers departed, the colonialism ended, then it was this class which came to power. So as a result, the ideas and the dreams and the ambitions and the vision of the first generation of Islamic economists were not realized because there was no power. The Muslims did not have power. Actually, the power was in the hands of the comprador class, which was very much owed allegiance to the West, and they ran everything on Western patterns. And they were, although they mouthed, so there was a contradiction and a hypocrisy which arose all over the Islamic world, that the rulers would talk about Islam, but they would not implement it. They would talk about it because the revolutions that brought them to power were fueled and had the engine of Muslim blood, which was shed for the sake of Islam, so they had to talk about Islam. At the same time, their allegiance was not to Islam, but to the West, so they could not implement it. So we had a situation all over the Islamic world where the words and the laws and the discourse had a lot of Islamic elements, but the reality had nothing. And so the second generation, the first generation were revolutionaries. They wanted to revolutionize the world. And so at that point, after the liberation, maybe let's say from 1950 to 1975, after the end of World War II, nearly 90% of the Islamic world got liberated. So the first quarter century was spent in the Islamic struggles for power. So there were Islamic Jamaat in Pakistan and equivalent movements all over the Islamic world who tried to get political power, but everywhere they failed. They failed because there is the West had a heavy interest in keeping control of the colonies, and they had institutions. The military was very strongly under the grip of Western influence by design, and also they had control over the rulers, and occasionally when someone would come to power, they would create coups, like in Iran. I think Mossadegh came to power. He was by a democratic process, and he wanted to get control for Iran for the oil fields, and then so CIA created a coup and brought the king, who would be a puppet for the Western forces. And all over the Islamic world, this kind of thing happened. Whenever genuine domestically inspired leaders would come to power, they would be killed, or a coup would replace them. So for about 25 centuries, this effort was made to get Islam in control so that we could implement Islamic economics, but this effort failed all over the world. Now, one very important thing to understand is that today's system, how it works. In the last session, somebody asked about the debt and $1 trillion of debt. So basically, the system, the neo-colonial system, is much more efficient and much more sophisticated than the old system, where you had a white governor and armies. And so now they don't use this system anymore. But the colonialism is still going on. As was said in the first session, we see billions of dollars in interest payments going from the colonies, from the poorest to the richest people. So the same thing which was happening in colonialism, that all the surplus produced in the developing world was being transferred to the imperialists. The same process is going on today. But how it is going on is different. So how it goes on today is that the rulers of the country, which are the politicians and the military and basically the elites, they receive massive loans from the West. These loans are just pretend loans. They are not really loans. It is given in the name of financing some project, but the project never gets done, and it's not important what the project is. These loans are actually salaries which are being paid to the rulers, and in return for this salary, the job of the ruler is to tax the country and to provide the resources back and to make sure that the country doesn't develop, because if they do, then they will become powerful and be able to resist the power. So one very important element of the system is the money and the finance. The current system of the world is such, as was mentioned in the first plenary session, is that the dollar is king. It is the reserve currency. It is like gold. Anybody, no matter how many dollars they print, there is no accountability for this. No inflation will result, because dollar is equivalent to gold because it's used as a reserve currency in all other places. And system is asymmetric. No other country has that kind of power. And attempts to change the system are effectively blocked so as to keep the hegemony of the dollar. So, after 1975, after a quarter century of effort to bring Islam to power, it was realized that this is not going to work. So the second generation of Islamic economists, starting with that 1976 Mecca conference that was referred to, this second generation thought again about the problem, and they said that, okay, we are not going to get a revolution. So what should we do? What we can do is, we shouldn't give up. We should take the existing system, capitalist system, and modify it to make it Islamic. So second generation thinking was pragmatic, not revolutionary. So they said, okay, let's take capitalism and tinker with it and make it Islamic. So when they went for training so in order to tinker with the system, you have to understand the system. So first generation system, economists had rejected capitalism completely. They said, this is all wrong. This is contradicts Islam in many ways. But the second generation, they went to Western institutions and they got their PhDs and they studied Western economics, and they were trained and indoctrinated into Western ways of thinking. And so they took the assumptions of neoclassical economics and thought that this was wahi. And they took the Western institutional structure and they said that this is compulsory, there is no way to live without it. So now the question did not become, we change the institutional structure to be Islamic. They said, okay, this structure, how can we change Islam to bring this into compatibility with this structure? So there were three major mistakes that were made by the second generation. One was that they did not understand that there is a spirit which drives institutions. So institution is the form, but there is also a ruh for the institution. So for the banking system, the ruh of the system, the spirit, is the accumulation of wealth, greed. The more money you have, the more better it is. Similarly, the firm, the object is to make money, however you make money. So this spirit cannot be detached from the form. So what the second generation tried to do was that they keep the form, but they ignore the fact that with the form, you have also got the spirit, and the spirit is un-Islamic. Similarly, the Western economic theorists claimed that my discipline is scientific, it is positive, it is objective, it is factual. This is all false. Western economics is not objective, it is not positive, it's not factual. As everybody can see, they didn't even understand how the global financial crisis took place, and they still have no idea how to fix the problems. There is very little knowledge. It's actually what you might call ulum al-jahiliyyah. If you remember that in the beginning of the Quran, Allah Ta'ala says that these people think they are very smart, but actually they are fools, but they do not know. And this is exactly the case with economists. So today, again, the same revolution that was created by Islam in the first place is now possible because the ulum that we are so frightened by, that there is so much mathematics, this is all just to scare people, and there is nothing real, genuine behind it. And actually the Western ulum are founded on a deep misunderstanding of the nature of the human being. They think that human beings are robots, they make calculations, and they think that human beings are consumption machines, they should maximize consumption. All of this is completely wrong. There is nothing, this is not true of any human being, whether it's in the West or in the East. No human being is a consumption machine, and no human being is a robot. They all have free will, and they all have hearts. This factor got ignored, and is ignored. Islam has a far deeper, more complex and sophisticated understanding of human condition, which cannot be reduced to mathematics. Now we are thinking that the mathematical description of human behavior is a strength of the Western tradition, but actually it's a weakness because human behavior cannot be described with mathematics. So we have to start by questioning the fundamentals, the root, the basis of Western economic thought. According to them, the way to achieve competitiveness is to have cutthroat competition, and this creates efficiency, and we live in a jungle. But actually Islam teaches us cooperation, and the cooperation is what leads to efficiency. And Islamic institutional structure was guilds. People, this is considered bad in the West because it's monopoly, but actually you see, if a guild of doctors says that is given the responsibility that you are responsible to take care of the health problems of the entire nation, then the same monopoly, which if it is going out for profits can be extremely harmful, if they are given responsibility they can be extremely helpful. And this was the structure. So we have to ask, why should firms maximize profits? What a stupid thing to do. I mean, what are you going to do with all those profits? Shouldn't you have a higher goal in life? And today, our firms should have the goal of serving mankind. And yes, you make a jaiz profit, that's allowed by Islam, and you do it because you need it to provide the service. If you start doing everything for free, you will not be able to run your service. So we have to reorient. Our goal is not to the bottom line, our goal is to provide service to mankind out of the love of Allah. And similarly, Allah Ta'ala teaches us generosity, He condemns greed. So it is actually the fundamental nature. Psychologists who have studied human beings have said that human being is naturally generous. He likes to give. He enjoys more giving than getting. And this greed is very harmful. It's poisonous. So this kind of message that we have absorbed is very harmful. So this is the last slide. The Western economic theory is built for a jungle, for